Hey there, super friends. It's Joey with Last Point Gaming. Today is Thursday, November 21st, 2019. How y'all doing? Hopefully we don't lose too much quality here. I'm using my, phone standard voice recorder because Spreaker's app changed, and I've lost, 4 recordings now to somebody calling while it was recording. And instead of pausing the recording like it used to do, and then once I, dealt with the call, I could unpause it and continue to record, it now stops it. So, it's halfway through my recording, just cut off, and, I guess I could, edit and whatever, but that really goes against the spirit of how I do things. So, here we are. Week 1 of unemployment and searching for a job. Had an interview on Tuesday. I think I'm 60% for that job, and I should be hearing sometime today or tomorrow. Not terribly excited about that one, but it's a job, So I had a phone screening that I think I'm 85% to get, tapped for an in-person interview. I think that went really well. My former managing director got back to me, I think on Tuesday as well. Tuesday was a big day for me. That, he's going to see what he can do for me. So we got prospects. Still firing off applications and everything. I have to file my unemployment claim. I've been meaning to do it all week, but I've also had a sick toddler at home. Girly McBabyface has had a rough one. But that all being said, okay. So gamery stuff. Now that I've filled you in on what's been going on with me. So there's been a lot of Magic community stuff going on. And I think that's just what we're going to talk about today. I've spent a lot of time, crawling over job boards and everything. So this requires not a lot of research. I think it was Oliver Tomiko that tweeted the initial thread that many have either retweeted or subtweeted concerning the demands of the grind, really. Now he's talking in specific to the SCG Tour and especially chasing the Players' Championship. I find myself feeling very ambivalent about the things he said here, because when I went to Nationals a couple years ago, and I know I told the whole story then, but it's been a while. So we have a local Magic events Facebook group, with our local people and everything, so we can coordinate who's going to what and get carpools together and people who want to share hotel rooms and all that happy stuff. So he had made a post about, who's going to Nationals and tagged a bunch of us. One of them was me. And I was like, haha, very funny, Captain. Was supposed to shame me into doing better next year. And he's like, what are you even talking about? I'm like, there's no way I'm qualified. And he's like, oh, no, you are. Yeah, the qualification for Nationals was 500 Planeswalker points or something like that. Go play at F&M every week, do okay, maybe do a couple larger events, and pre-releases. Pre-releases, for some reason, give you a significant amount of Planeswalker points. You figure I do at least one a set, usually multiple. Like, I think the last one, I think we ended up doing 3. We did the early Friday and both Saturday events. Judge covered the late Friday and both Sunday events. Now, back at that time, we were usually doing like 2. We'd do both 2-headed giant events. One I'd pair with Boo, and the other one she'd pair with Rockstar, and I'd pick up whoever was looking for a partner. But yeah, it's not like I never day 2'd a tournament in my life. Well, except for Nationals, because everybody got instant day 2'd. Like, you were automatically included in day 2. But, I mean, I'm still striving for my positive win-loss record. I'm still striving to go 5-4 day 1 of an event. So the bar for Nationals was incredibly low. When you figure, when you remember that one of the prizes for that tournament at the top end was the invite to Worlds. So, it was kind of a big deal. And it just seemed like, this was being pushed as like, oh yeah, hey, you gotta be qualified for this tournament. I'm like, I don't know. I feel like most people who played Magic consistently would be qualified for this tournament. It just doesn't feel special. I mean, I went because, hey, I got a Mutavault, 6 packs, got to, have a weekend, doing a tournament with my friends, got to drink Saturday night, that was nice. So it was a good time and everything, like, I enjoy traveling with the guys, but the Players' Championship through SCG is like, let's say it's like the top 32 players, 24, I don't know, it's a fixed number, and it's the top however many players in SCG points. So some people who professionally play this game, like, say the SCG team, or I guess there isn't like an official playing SCG team, but the SCG content creators, wow, just totally lost that thought. Anyway, so for actual professional, what I do for a living is play Magic the Gathering players, they go to an open every weekend. Like, they go to most of the opens. They go to IQs. They, participate in all these events and everything. So in order to, be in the Players' Championship race, you really got to grind a lot. Now, personally, I would kind of like to see IQs no longer offer points towards the Player Championship, because that one in specific becomes problematic, and I've seen a couple players mention it, that, like, it really sucks to not be able to, like, in the finals, like, I went and played in this tournament and everything, but we're in the finals, I'm already queued for the Envy, but I can't afford to concede this round. Like, I can't give my opponent the invite because I need the SCG points. Of course, I don't know. I'm not sure how that works. Because I know, like, well, no, I guess it is, like, the player that's won the tournament, that's how the qualification's determined. I don't know. But anyway, that, like, you're basically denying other players an opportunity to play in the Invitational that you're already qualified for because you're trying to get the Players' Championship points. And, that doesn't seem right. Like, the old PPTQ series, once you were qualified for the RPTQ, you could no longer compete in PPTQs. you couldn't just run around spiking all the PPTQs you could get to make the RPTQ field smaller. So it seems weird that not only can you continue to compete in IQs once you're already qualified, but you're actually incentivized to do so. That seems kind of strange for a qualifier tournament. So, yeah, personally, I'd like to see IQs no longer award these points. Oh, man, this app doesn't keep the phone screen unlocked, so I really got to figure out a better way to do this. Anyway, now as far as how can we make the Players' Championships still this top-end, high-level event without, pushing such a rough grind? The idea of an elite tournament series like the Players' Championship, which had disappeared for a few years, I believe. I think this is the first time it's back. Personally, I don't see a problem with there being tournaments with a high bar for entry like that. It's like, no, only the top end can get there, but at the same time, it's really has little to do with performance. It seems to be who can play the most events and do reasonably well. Like, yeah, wins at an open give you more points than I think everybody down to it's top 32 or something get at least 1 point. So, winning an open does more for you than just playing in an open, obviously. Just like winning an IQ does more for you than just playing in it. But at the same time, you can have somebody, win 2 opens and 2 IQs, top 8, maybe 2 more opens, but that being all their capacity to compete for the year. So they've demonstrated, a high level of play, and still they don't make this Players' Championship. So I don't know. I like the eliteness of it, that it's a goal to strive for, but there is a lot of uncertainty in it, because it really isn't just about what you do. There are all kinds of shifting factors based on how well players around you do, who else is chasing after it. So I can understand the stress point of view that, there's no point where you can say, okay, I'm good. I can take a couple weeks off. If this is one of your real goals, is to get into this tournament. So, a couple ways that they could preserve the eliteness of being in this tournament while making it maybe a little bit healthier for players to pursue is you could either have, like Nationals, a set point value that qualifies you, like 50 SCG points. I don't actually know how many SCG points you earn for different things, because I never usually do well enough in those things to care. I don't get SCG points. But I think winning an open is 9 points. I think it's 9 points for winning, 6 points for semifinal knockout, 3 points for quarterfinals knockout, and then 9th through whatever place each get 1 point. I think. Don't quote me on that, though. So you could determine, what a good point value is, but then you run the risk of it being too high and ending up with too small a field, or being too low and ending up with too large a field. So you could do it that way. I'm not sure that really captures what they're looking for, though. The other thing I was thinking about that might be a good qualification metric is each winner of an open and invitational for, the recording period where qualification for the PC is determined. Because I think it's yearly, and there's 3 seasons a year with SCG. I feel like there's only 2 invitationals anymore, though. I think it's only at the summer and winter cons, but I don't know. There may be a 3rd one. And based on, you figure 3 seasons over 12 months means each season's about 4 months long. There isn't an open every single weekend, a lot of weekends. But even if there was, sorry. Whoa. 12 weeks times 3 is only 36 weeks. There's 52 weeks in a year. What did I do wrong here? Oh, 16 weeks. There we go. I think there's usually, I want to say 8 tournament stops in a season. So in 3 seasons, that's 24, plus your 2 to 3 invitational winners. You're looking at 26 to 27 player field if that's your metric for determination. And I think it's a fair metric for determination. Or for qualification. I'm going to pause y'all real quick. I'm in line at the drive-thru to get coffee. I only let you know that I'm pausing you because I don't always come back where I left off, but I'll be back. Okay, so hopefully this is adding on to the end. I don't know. I'm having trouble figuring out how this recorder works. But yeah, so I think if they wanted to go to, each open winner and the invitational winners, now team tournaments of course would net 3 open winners instead of 1, so that messes with the numbers a little bit, but you're still looking at an elite qualification metric. I mean, winning tournaments is hard. There is a reason that player careers are generally measured in top 8s as opposed to tournament wins. Tournament wins are measured, but we don't just look at the players with a high number of wins, we look at the players with high numbers of top 8s. So, I think, winning these prestigious tournaments, big field, a lot of, high competition, all the high-end players show up for these things. And I actually think it makes the Players' Championship a more chaseable dream for a lot of people that say can only, they can't afford to be running around playing every weekend. They have jobs and lives and families and, maybe have to stick to tournaments that are a little closer to home. That, it gives that dream of, okay, I can go spike this open, win this, and then I would get to play in this Players' Championship. And, maybe they invest a little more time in trying to do well. I don't know. But as far as, the mental health toll of the grind, the Magic Pro Life is not what I would generally look at as healthy, really, in any way. The MPL was a neat thing. Is a neat thing, I guess. I think they're still going with that. And, you know, those players get a reasonable salary. But as far as players that just kind of grind for tournament wins and do content creation, it's tough to survive in that. You know, without another source of income. So I have to say that I find the Magic Pro grinder life to be just unhealthy on all fronts, and I don't think fixing the Players' Championship really changes that. Alright, we're going to try pausing again. So, yeah, I don't think changing the qualification metric for the Players' Championship really changes the fact that chasing down the dream of being a professional Magic player inherently leads to unhealthy practices. I mean, it's just kind of the fact of life that not everybody can be a professional Magic player. Just like not everybody can be, you know, a professional actor. Oh my god, that's hot. You know, not everybody can be a professional athlete. That it is a competitive market to try to be involved in. But the really sad thing about it is even if you know, you are the Brad Pitt or Mila Jovovich, you know, you make it, so to speak, in the arena, you're not set for life like these other professions where, you know, you're making millions of dollars or anything like that. Like, you know, you even look at John Finkel, the original Magic Pro, at least here in the States. John Finkel had a career in the finance industry. And there's a lot of money to be made in that industry, so I'm assuming he made a lot in there. He also, most of the money he's made from competition hasn't been from Magic, it's been from poker tournaments. And you do see a fair amount of crossover with these high-end Magic players, especially males, and high-end poker tournaments, because outside of the actual skills of the game, such as, you know, decent deck construction and that kind of thing, the strategy of playing against an opponent is very similar, and what you're trying to do in both games is pretty similar, because they're games of imperfect information. And so you're playing at a level where you need to be bluffing if you're on air, or, you know, baiting your opponents into a trap if your hand isn't nothing but air. Also trying to guess what they have and determine what is probable for them to be looking at based on their actions. As far as the, I'll call it soft skills of the game, even though they're not really soft skills, but the more abstract skills in the game that people tend to consider less as part of the game, the crossover between Magic and poker is pretty significant. You know, you're still looking to manage your risk and reward ratio. You're still trying to read your opponents. You're still trying to find your max value line. You know, it's a very different game, but again, these skills not directly related to the specific game Magic the Gathering are transferable between the two. And in actuality, you know, it's a little more predictable because each deck of playing cards has 52 cards. So if you know how many decks are involved, if there's multiple decks involved, you can run the probability based on what's in your hand, and in the case of games like Texas Hold'em, what's up on the table, how many cards are in everybody's hands. Like, you can run the numbers on probability of who's holding what. And you actually are a bit more informed in a game like that, where it's, you know what's in the deck. I can't tell you the amount of times in a Magic game I've gotten blown out by a card that I'm like, the shit is that card? Hold on, I gotta read this. Because nobody plays it. Because it's generally regarded as a bad card. But in this person's deck, based on their strategy and the way they play, this card is like a great out of nowhere screw you. I mean, dude, I played Feat of Resistance in Celestia Scales, and I refused to give that card up. Everybody else moved away from it. It was like, nah, this card's bad. I was protecting that goddamn Mana Gorger Hydra. It's the whole reason I played the deck. Nobody killing my Mana Gorgers. And the amount of games I won because the anticipation was that I was no longer playing that card because... What? Oh, good God. Alright, let's try to get away from all the police and fire truck and ambulance activity. Man, I hope everybody's okay. That's a lot of flashing lights. I don't know if it's an accident or what. But that is a ton of flashing lights. Oh, luckily, I don't really have anywhere to be today, so... Anyway, all that aside. So, yeah, a lot of the players that are comfortable financially, it's not from Magic. They, it's either, their day job, or that they're poker tournament players, too. And they're very good at that. There's not really a lot of money to be made in Magic. Like, you look at, again, John Finkel's a really good example because of how long he's been a Magic pro. He's been less active in the last couple of years. But you look at his lifetime tournament earnings, and, yeah, the number is pretty big. It's like $1 million. But then when you aggregate that over 20 years... And remember that he was one of the first to be spiking out these tournaments. Like, it's really not that much money. I mean, I've probably made over $1 million in my lifetime at this point. Hold on. Let me stop and think about that for a second. Okay, maybe not me personally, but between my husband and I. Yeah. Hell, I think in the time we've been married. But $1 million really isn't that much money anymore. Also, I think you have to pay taxes on tournament winnings. So it's not even like free and clear money. So, this is like, for a very long time in the Magic community, John Finkel was considered like the height of aspiration in the game. Like, he was the boss mob. And again, he's been less competitive as far as I understand in the last couple of years, as far as in Magic. Like, he would go to Pro Tours and everything, but, I mean, he got an appearance fee for showing up, so, of course, why not go? And, you know, he's not, like, set for life off of Magic winnings. You figure, what, I don't know about GPs. I think the top end at SCG is, like, $5,000. I think a GP, I want to say it's, like, 10. Which, 10,000 for a weekend, if that is the right amount. I don't know. A weekend of quote-unquote work, because, again, it is work in that it's not easy to win a tournament by any stretch. But, you know, you're also not doing manual labor and all that. You know, so that's a good paycheck for a weekend, but it's highly undependable. Because, you know, it's one of those things, you can do everything right, you know, for where you are in any given game. You know, keep a reasonable hand and draw nothing but air. Or, you know, have your god hand, but the matchup's bad for you. And your opponent also has their god hand, which, in that case, they win. You know, there are so many variants in how a game plays out. And, I mean, the best players, you know, look for things in their control to improve their standings as opposed to, you know, attributing all losses, it was just variance, just bad draw, it was just a bad matchup. Because there are things that you can do to shore this stuff up a little bit. But variance is a real factor in the game. I mean, if it wasn't intended to be, then there would be no deck minimum, you know? There'd be no minimum deck size. It'd be bring as many cards as you think it's going to take to win. Bearing in mind that once you run out of cards in your library, you lose. But there is a minimum deck size. You know, saying, hey, you got to play at least 60 cards. You know, yeah, 12 of those cards are your combo pieces. Or, you know, your big important cards in the deck. Well, you gotta find something to put in the other 48 slots. To, you know, dilute this. So, variance is an intended part of the game. Because honestly, it gets the... If you remove variance completely from, you know, the actual drawing and playing out of the game, you kind of get to a point where two players sit down at a table and they say, well, what are you playing? Oh, I'm playing Storm. What are you playing? I'm playing Humans. Oh, okay, I lose. Like, there's just no point in even playing the game. You know, I've seen people propose that Magic decks get split into two decks, a land deck and a not land deck, and each turn you choose which deck you draw from. No, because it's not how this game works. Changing the mulligan rules to soften the blow of mulligans, or to kind of facilitate players being able to actually play the game. And in general, I don't mind. I mean, hell, I remember the original mulligan rule, and it was you could only mulligan if you had all lands or no lands. If you had one land, and 6 5-drops in your hand, you had to keep it. If you had 6 lands and a 1-drop, you had to keep it. If you had 6 lands and a dark red, you had to keep it. Your hand at that point is essentially all mana. And then we went to the, okay, you can mulligan because you don't like the hand, but you lose a card. Alright. That, I think that was a vast improvement. Because, you know, there was what, the 1-land Belcher deck? All it needed was 1 land. So, you know, that deck can be orchestrated in such a way that there's only 1 land in the deck. So you get to kind of keep mulliganing until you get that land. And then you just gotta hope that the rest of it works out. You know, there were decks that could be built to exploit this. And I mean, this was also in a time where you had things like the Moxen, Lotus. You had things outside of lands that could generate mana. So the landscape of the game has changed since then. It makes sense that the mulligan rule changed. And then we added the Scry, which I actually thought was very good. Boo had once proposed that you should get to Scry 1 X times, where X is the number that you have mulligan, or number of cards you're down, basically. So you mull to 4, Scry 1 3 times. Not Scry 3, but Scry 1. So if your 4 keep is 2 lands and 2, you know, whatever spells that you can cast off those 2 lands, and, you know, the top 3 cards of your deck are all high cost things, you can put them all on the bottom. Now, we've had some discussions with the locals over whether or not this is actually more or less broken than the London Mulligan. Personally, I think it's less broken. The London Mulligan really rewards combo decks. And it really does. Especially in Game 1. Now in Games 2 and 3, you know, you can mulligan as aggressively to sideboard cards as they can mulligan to combo pieces, but I don't know. I'm still not really about the London Mulligan in most formats. Like, I think it's bad for Modern. I think it's especially bad for formats like Legacy and Vintage, where, you know, the power level of cards is so fucking extreme that, you know, going down to 3 cards, if they're the right 3, is completely fine. Limited. I think it's very good for limited. Just because, you know, limited decks are all a bunch of cobbled together shit. Like, it's how it goes. You know, you've got your handful of good cards in the deck, and then a bunch of filler. Standard, I'm on the fence. This current standard format, oh my god, this current standard format is just, I don't really think there's any fixing it. Because for every boogeyman they take out, a new one will spring up. Like, Jesus Christ, I can't even buy a win on Arena anymore. Though, I mean, it is less irritating. Like, I hate the Fires of Invention deck. That's kind of, ugh. And it just feels like every time they try to correct the format, like, I feel like they just shouldn't have banned Field from the Dead when they did. Or Field of the Dead when they did. Because we had that Mythic Championship, right before the ban announcement, and it's clear that it was decided before that tournament happened what was going to happen. Because you had such a large number of these decks enter that tournament, and so few of them did notably well. I mean, really, there was only one in the top 8. Now, that was, we've had the talk before about you can't gauge meta off of things that happen at a Pro Tour because you're looking at an elite field. And, Paulo Viter did a bit on this a while back about how when selecting a deck for a Pro Tour, it's a different process that a lot of these high-end pros go through than selecting a deck for a Grand Prix or an Open, because you have to factor in you're not going to be getting a lot of wins based on, oh, well, I mean, I have a higher skill level in the game. So even though it's a bad matchup for me, I can still pull out this win because my intricate knowledge of the game and, how to play it at optimum. And you don't get as many chances like that in those high-end tournaments because you're looking at people of equivalent skill level. But at the same time, Field of the Dead didn't really seem to be as big a problem. There seemed to be reasonable answers to it. The big thing, and it's what I had said about the Field of the Dead deck in the beginning, is, yes, it lost Scape Shift. At the same time, the rest of the format lost the best way to interact with that deck, being Field of Ruin. But most of the rest of that shell was still intact. All the land tutor cards are still there. All the ramp cards and everything. Plus, a couple new ones from Eldraine. So, yeah, they can't Scape Shift. So that's a thing. That changes the dynamic of the deck, but all in all, the basic strategy is still there. And it was a reasonable deck previously with Field of Ruin in the format and Scape Shift. So those two cards removed, and, big shake up to the rest of the decks in the format. Everybody else is trying to find their way, whereas this Field of the Dead deck is still fairly well intact. Which is why I think it was such a breakout deck in the beginning of the format. Also, this format is not very friendly to aggro because of all the incidental life gain bits. So usually at the beginning of a new format, you see, like, mono red just dominates the field. Because while everybody else is trying to figure out how to make this combo work at its maximum, how to exploit the most value out of Hero Precinct 1, how to build the best deck around Feather the Redeemed, or whatever else they're trying to do, that ultimately, once they get all the pieces together, it's going to be a higher power level deck than these mono red aggro decks. But in the beginning, while they're still tweaking and seeing what works and what doesn't, it stumbles a little bit, and it stumbles just enough for these hardcore aggro decks to be like, well, what does your deck do? Damage. That's it. It doesn't do cute, fun things, doesn't do fun combat tricks, it just does damage. They tend to do well in the beginning of these formats, while everybody else is trying to figure out how to get this deck with cute, fun tricks and everything to work at its optimum. But because this format is, by its nature, slower and grindier because of all this stupid life gain, and big butt creatures, 1/3s, 1/4s, it was a good setup for the Field of the Dead deck to continue to be good. And because it was still good while everybody else was trying to figure out how to make their deck work, it was dominant. And I mean, I did concede back then that it may come to the point that Field of the Dead is determined that it needs to be banned. But at that time, I thought the format was too young to be looking at a ban. And I think the Field of the Dead ban was a mistake. Because without that deck to pin down Oko became a bully of the format. Now, that card was always fucking bonkers, and we all knew it. That card is insane. Some mistake was made along the way there. And, you know, I don't want to trash talk on people in R&D and whatever. I really don't. And I don't want to make this, you know, sound like I'm being bitchy about it. But it was a pretty egregious mistake. So, I don't know if there were last minute changes that, you know, in the vacuum, in whatever problem they were trying to solve with how it was originally written, these changes solved that problem, and it just, you know, nobody thought of, you know, what those changes did in other ways. That they were looking to solve a specific problem, they solved that problem, they went, okay, good, we're good. I don't know if there was a typo, because it really feels like the second plus ability should be a minus, and really should be till end of turn. I don't know if it was a card space issue, which is entirely possible. Like, fun fact, the original Lich was supposed to operate more like Lich's Mastery, but there wasn't a word for hexproof at that point, or shroud. They didn't have the keyword that they needed, so they'd have to put the rules text on the card, and the rules text on Lich already took up the whole fucking text box. They didn't have room to fit it, so Lich didn't get hexproof. So maybe the Elk effect was supposed to be only until end of turn. Or maybe it was supposed to be target thing you control. You know, it could be that ability ended up having to get changed because of space. You know, just simple, not game mechanic reason, but a, you know, physical print limitation. And it just wasn't foreseen that, you know, how that would spin out of control. I don't know. But that card's a mess. And should have never happened in the way it got printed. But there are all kinds of factors that could have been at play for why it ended up being the way it is. So, I'm not gonna, you know, down on anybody from the play design team or R&D or anything, because there's a lot of moving pieces to keep track of. Eldraine was a bigger set, had a bunch of new mechanics, you know, but the simple fact that there's not a reminder text on the light's red, calm down. There's not reminder text for what food tokens do on that card, indicates that there was some kind of concern there. Because, you know, every card in a new set with a new mechanic usually has the reminder text for what that mechanic does. That one doesn't. So, yeah. Whatever happened there, that card's insane. And, I mean, it's wrecking, like, every format. Even formats that have Planeswalker answers. Formats that Ren and 6 didn't manage to wreck. So, yeah, card's a bit busted. Shouldn't have happened, but it did. and Field of the Dead seemed to be pinning down Oko decks. Like, they didn't seem to be able to survive in the Field of the Dead meta, but other decks were springing up and doing well. And that's the thing, when they do bans, it's really... I generally don't think it's correct to see a single card banned in a completely new format like that. Because, you know, as much as I bitched about them nerfing Rami Red when they nerfed Temur Energy, because I happened to be playing Rami Red at the time, it was a smart move in retrospect, because Rami Red may have not been able to sit on the format for terribly long. I don't know, though. That was one of the best red decks we've ever had, because it was an aggressive deck that could act like a mid-range deck. I mean, I really see it as a fast-leaning mid-range deck. But, you know, it had all these great early damage creatures. A lot of things with haste. And card refueling, or, you know, hand refill from Bomat Courier, which is a big fucking deal. It had, you know, Hazoret, the sticky fucking threat. Had threats that could come back from the graveyard. It, you know, it had the point, because a lot of times what happens in straight aggro decks is you end up in top deck mode by like turn 2 or 3, and then, you know, a board wipe just fucking nukes you, or, you know, anything that damages the progress you've done just destroys you. So, in the case of Rami Red, between being able to pull things back from the graveyard and have Hazoret that she's hard to get off the battlefield and she just sits there and hucks dead cards at you, plus Ramunap Ruins, like that mechanic in and of itself, where it's like, okay, you know, I've got you down to 5 life or whatever, low total. You're finally getting your shit together. Like, your deck's finally starting to do its thing. I only need a couple more points of damage, so as long as I have the lands to do it. You know, at this point, every draw is gas. If it's a land, cool. That gives me enough lands to sack another desert and throw it at you. If, you know, I have Hazoret on the battlefield, it's either a threat I play into the battlefield and I can swing in this turn because it has haste, or it's, you know, if it's more useful to take it as a card to throw at your face, I throw it at your face. It was a very good deck, which is why it was the only deck that had a decent win ratio against Temur Energy, which was an insane deck. So when they reduced the effectiveness of Temur Energy, yeah, they kind of had to do something to Rami Red. On-Crop Crasher was an interesting choice. Just because, like, personally, I sided that card out a lot. It didn't come back from the yard. Like, yeah, you could get the one swing in with it. And pin down one of their blockers. Is that what it did? I'm trying to remember what its exert ability was, but it died to your token removal strategy. Personally, I used Fiery Cannonade because Soulscar Mage lived through it. And it had no value in the art. So, to me, it was one of the weakest cards in the deck. Did they ban Ramunap Ruins? I think they banned Ramunap Ruins at the same time. And that also made sense. Because, again, what that land enabled you to do as a burn deck was continue to burn when, you know, now, usually in a burn deck, once you get to that stage of the game, the last thing you want to draw are lands. You want to be drawing out your couple more hasty chip points to take them down, because your board's been nuked. But Ramunap Ruins enabled every draw to be a live draw in that deck at that stage of the game, removing one of the biggest hindrances from the aggro archetype. So it made sense, because if they didn't do something to chip at Rami Red, it would have definitely dominated the format. I don't know how long it would have dominated the format, but there's a fair chance it would have been a while before anybody could come up with something that... Because, like, blue-black control sucked against Rami Red. Tokens was, at one point, pretty good, and then we got the Rampaging Ferocidon. It's like, okay, tokens now kill you. So, you know, there were all these other factors. When they banned Field of the Dead and nothing else, that was problematic. But again, when it comes to bans, it's difficult to foresee the effect they're going to have on a game or on the field when you're banning the card from, like, the one deck that everybody's playing. Because you can't really see what else is going to emerge from there, because nothing else is doing well. And I know bans suck, especially cards like Oko. Because, I mean, that he was a mythic rare, so lowest possible supply to demand ratio, I guess, because it was a card that was heavily played in a mythic rare slot, or I guess highest ratio, I don't know, lowest supply to highest demand ratio, however the hell you say that. So that card was crazy expensive. I mean, they were like $70, and apparently are just keep going up, which is good for all the standard players that bought into him to play the Oko deck, and now it got banned, so it's worthless to them in standard. At least they can recoup value on that card. I like when Feldar Guardian got banned, because for some reason we just refused to fucking ban Saheeli. You know, it's like, oh, well, it's a mythic and say. Well, yeah, but she just made it worthless, because it's, like, literally all Saheeli does. She is not useful in really any other capacity. So it actually makes a lot more sense to ban the Saheeli and see what cute stuff comes out of flickering with Feldar Guardian. But the thing is the banning of Feldar Guardian made your Saheeli's worthless anyway. Like, it really didn't matter from the consumer point of view. So, again, at least Oko has maintained value. But it sucks to buy into a deck like this. Card gets banned and, you know, just wipes out all your value. You know, monetarily speaking. But at the same time, I don't think it's a bad sign for the game when we have these formats that require bans. You know, I bitched a lot more about it back during Kaladesh, but I hate artifact blocks. I really do. I think it's a get off my lawn thing. I remember one guy in our playgroup made an entirely colorless artifact deck back in the day, and it sucked. It was so bad. Because, yeah, artifacts were cool and all. There were some that did some neat shit. But, like, when you're relying off of Felden's Canes to win the game and shit, like, it's not gonna work out. So, yeah, I personally hate artifact blocks. And I think the energy mechanic had some issues. The biggest of which being that you couldn't do anything to your opponent's energy pool. Once they had the energy, you were boned. You know, it was this not expiring resource that, yeah, it got consumed. You know, unlike lands that you tap them for mana and then get to do it again the next turn. Once you spent an energy point, the energy point was gone. But there were so many cards that just happened to give you energy in addition to whatever else they did. And they seem to have learned some things from it. And as long as they're showing that they're learning from these missteps, they have to keep pushing the game to evolve. That's the reality of it. The game can't stagnate. Nobody wants to be playing essentially the same standard format over and over again with just different card names. So they have to keep pushing limits and looking at new design spaces and looking for ways to evolve the game. And of course, that is going to lead to shit like this, where you end up with a standard format that you're like, what the hell, guys? Again, Oko, I don't think that was a pushing limits, and I think something happened to cause a change with that card that, you know, might have been an 11th hour change. They're trying to get everything wrapped to get the set finished and pushed off to the printers and all that, and said, okay, well, we're just going to do this, and didn't have time to adequately test how that affected things. But, you know, as far as, like, cards like Once Upon a Time, I don't know, card didn't seem that busted to me in Standard, but I guess it was. You know, and there's the whole, well, stop printing free spells. I mean, Fire's an invention. Like, that gives you 2 free spells a turn. And Once Upon a Time is only free once. I think without the London Mulligan, Once Upon a Time wouldn't have been as insanely good. I think it still would have been good. I think it would have been like one of those, oh, mulligan to 5, but I got a Once Upon a Time, so I got a Hail Mary. Let's hope it works out. But with the ability to sculpt your opening hand to a point with the London Mulligan and a card like that, definitely changes how it interacts with the format. And I don't know how far out they develop sets. Like, was Eldraine finalized before the London Mulligan was the official Mulligan rule? I don't know. So, it's good that they're exploring new design spaces for the game. That is going to cause some problems, and a lot of this goes back to, like, the secondary market just needs to not be so fucking insane. Because, I mean, that's the real hit. That's the real thing that I think bothers people with bans is, okay, you know, I wanted to be able to actually compete. Because it's not always about, well, maybe you just shouldn't play the most busted deck in the format. I mean, yeah, there are times where you can see the writing on the wall. Like, alright, that deck's getting a ban. Like, we all knew Saheeli Cat was going to get banned pretty fucking quick. Everybody saw that coming. But sometimes it's not foreseen. You know, that the deck isn't just very good, but it is, in fact, you know, format warping. And people buy into this deck because they want to compete, or they need to compete because this is what they do. So, I think the reply to, oh, your deck got banned, I guess you shouldn't have been playing such a degenerate deck. Well, when your job is to win fucking games of Magic, you're gonna play the best deck you can be playing, whether you like it or not. It's like the Hogak deck. I don't even think the people who played the Hogak deck enjoyed what they were doing. I think it was like, well, I mean, I gotta, like, this is how you fucking win games in Modern right now. I'm also reminded of, I love watching Todd Anderson stream. I really wish I got to see his stream more, because he has so many great moments. And like the one stream, he was playing Teferi on Arena, and yeah, this was Big Boy Teferi, or Tefable. And you know, he activates Teferi, and the tagline that goes off is, "I don't want to do this," and he's like, "I know, I don't. Then don't do it." I think a lot of times these high-end players end up playing decks that they don't particularly enjoy. They don't like what they're doing. They don't like that what they're doing is completely one-sided. But their job, their profession, is to win games of Magic. And this is how you win games of Magic right now, so they have to. So yeah, it really sucks to have a card from your deck banned that completely negates all the value of your deck. You know, this deck that you spent hundreds of dollars on is now essentially worthless. So from that aspect, yeah, it really, really sucks. And I feel for you. And, you know, as a player who only vaguely cares about her record, you know, this doesn't really bother me, because I don't drop that kind of money on singles. I'm like, nope, this just ain't worth it to me. But, you know, as players who are trying to break into, you know, the Magic fame circle, yeah, I mean, this is what you gotta be doing, and then when it gets banned, you know, you're out that money, and that does truly suck. But at the same time, it is kind of a necessary evil that they continue to push these spaces and see what they can do. You know, see how much they can bend the format before it breaks, because otherwise the game stagnates. And everybody's playing fucking Savannah lines. And nobody wants that. So it's a rough balancing act. And yeah, WotC has made its share of mistakes in recent years. And some of them are, you know, pretty like, what the hell were you thinking, WotC? But as far as, you know, card design and everything, a lot of these cards that turn out to be busted, with a few exceptions being mostly Oko and Hogak, I think it's fair to say that they couldn't foresee the effect it would have. Like, I hate Baby Teferi. I don't mind Narset so much, because I tend to not play decks that draw a lot of cards, so, you know, whatever. She can sit on the battlefield. But the inability to play instants is bleh. So, yeah, that's where it's at. This is a very long episode. Hopefully that makes up for the lack of episodes lately. But, as always, if you made it this far with me, thank you very much for listening, and I have no idea when I'm going to talk to y'all again. I'm going to try to, like, different times that I'm run around doing things, throw on and record, to try to keep episodes going, but, you know, without a job, the whole recording on my way home from work, yeah, it's not working so much. I might actually do a few episodes with Boo here upcoming on our way to F&Ms and everything. She wants to start a YouTube channel. I don't know how I feel about that. So, I don't know. We may look at that a little bit. But anyway, again, thanks for listening, and hopefully I'll talk to y'all soon.